Welcome to episode 9 of the Wholesome Business Podcast. I'm Tom Greenwood from wholegraindigital.com. This week I went to Southampton to meet with Dennis Durfall from V.E.R.A Systems, a specialist technology company in the field of lithium-ion batteries and particularly focused on sustainable transportation. We met Dennis recently through the Ethical Film Club, where he was a guest speaker for the film Revenge of the Electric Car, and he shared a lot of his experience, personal experience and professional experience from the last couple of decades on electric vehicle technology. And so I really was keen to get him on the podcast and sit down with him and get his thoughts on sustainable innovation, which is a really interesting topic that I've been involved in for around 10 years and seen some people succeed and a lot of people not really succeed. So it's great to see Dennis running a business specifically in this field. I wanted to get his thoughts on that, find out what the challenges are of making sustainable innovation commercially viable, and also to hear more about his current project, Project Venice, where they're taking a Venice taxi boat and developing a drop-in hybrid electric system, and using Venice really as a sort of pilot location where they can test out this new technology, prove it to the industry. They can reduce emissions, they can reduce fuel costs, they can reduce maintenance costs, they can reduce noise pollution, they can reduce vibration damage to the buildings. So many benefits that can be gained, but until somebody proves it, no one's taking up this technology. So Dennis has taken it upon himself to do that. We'll talk a bit about that at the end of the podcast. But he's got an IndieGogo campaign out to help fund this project. That he's really funding this himself out of his own pocket. So if you go on IndieGogo, search for Project Venice, you'll find out all about it, and really well worth supporting. Okay, over to Dennis. I thought it'd be good to go back to the beginning and just find out sort of where your interest in sustainable innovation came from and how you sort of came on this journey to where you are now with V.E.R.A Systems.
Yes, I think there were quite a few different topics coming together over the course of my life. But I worked as a soldier, surprisingly, as a soldier in the German army in repair and maintenance. Which has got nothing to do with sustainability, I suspect. And then one incident was that I bought an electric vehicle at the time, mainly out of interest. I thought, oh, this looks fun and interesting.
Yeah.
I'm an engineer, so I'm interested in technology, and I found it just interesting.
Was that the Golf that you...
No, that was a very small one-seater called City L. It was designed by a guy in Denmark, I think about 25 years ago already. They are still manufactured in Germany now by a small company, and it cost me 5,000 Deutschmark, which in nowadays money would be about 1,500 pounds.
Oh, wow.
Second-hand with new batteries, and it looked like
even
fun.
Now that sounds like a bargain.
It was a bargain. It was even convertible, so you could open it up and drive around in the open without any noise, and listening to the birds while you were driving. It was fast enough. It was doing about 40 miles an hour.
Yeah.
And what actually happened is my girlfriend at the time, she was scared driving it initially because it looked too different.
Yeah.
And it looked small, and she felt, well, how does it feel if you're next to a big lorry? Maybe
you feel kind of vulnerable.
You feel vulnerable.
Yeah.
But I think one day our other car was broken down or something, and then she had to use this small electric car. And from then on, she wanted to use it every day. Because it was really fun to drive.
Yeah.
And you feel so, because it is small, but you felt really nippy, and the silence, and it cost nothing to operate and run.
I think that's what a lot of people find with electric vehicles.
You've got to drive it.
Yeah, they don't get it until they drive one, and then suddenly there's no going back.
Yeah, and I think this is an important understanding for any sustainable or any change, really. People, often investors come and say, oh, you've got to give your presentation, what's the market size? And you say, well, with this sort of things, I don't know.
Yeah.
Because if I go out and ask people, would you buy one of these? They would say no. Why would they? They're happy with what they've got. And I think even Steve Jobs was saying something similar from Apple, saying, if I ask the customer what they want, they don't know what they want.
There's a famous quote, I think it's from Henry Ford, where he said, if I asked people what they'd wanted, they'd say faster horses.
Exactly. So and he developed the car. We used that quote in our crowdfunding campaign for the project. Actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we had the Steve Jobs quote didn't quite fit so well, but it's a similar mindset, and I think even surprisingly, even some entrepreneurs don't understand this. They keep asking me for, what's the business case, how big is the market, and you say, well, eventually the market is everyone, because we should all be driving these things. If you start thinking in a sustainable way, we got to stop using fossil fuels. Yeah. And the only replacement for fossil fuels are biofuels, but unfortunately they are very expensive to make because they need massive amounts of land in order to produce the crops to then make biofuels. Another option could of course be liquefying hydrogen somewhere in the desert, but for some reason no one has invested in that yet. It also needs a massive distribution chain, which isn't there. And it's also a new technology with new risks.
Do you think there's a big disconnect between sort of climate science on one hand, which is telling us where we need to be, and the sort of business thinking, which is very much focused on the here and now, how can I make profit? And there's not like a pathway from one to the other.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? The business people aren't looking at climate science and saying, in 2050, we need to be zero carbon. And
yes, I know what you mean. And I like the word disconnect. I think disconnect is one of the big root causes for, our incapability of making the change that is required. For example, I have a very good friend who works as an environmental, officer, I think. At the National Oceanography Center. Okay. So her responsibility is to reduce the footprint of the National Oceanography Center. Yeah. And NOC. At NOC, you've got all these environmental scientists working. Yes, so drilling in the Arctic and finding out what's happening. Yeah. And the funny thing is that these people who get paid for doing research on, so climate scientists basically getting paid by the public for doing research on climate change, don't seem to be very interested in saving energy themselves.
Right. Okay, that's interesting.
Which is actually quite shocking, but it shows how disconnected we are. I think our world nowadays is so complex that we don't really understand our own actions and the implications of our own actions. Yeah. So this makes it quite difficult. Coming back to this electric vehicle, we drove it and we found it really, really fun to drive and very cheap. And so we wondered, why isn't everyone driving this? Yeah. And we actually managed to convince a few friends around us. So surprisingly, within the German army, we suddenly had a group of people driving small electric vehicles, which doesn't really, when you think about a soldier, it wouldn't first come to your mind that they are all driving small electric vehicles. And we founded an electric vehicle club in that town. So we had eventually, I think now they've got about 40 members. Okay. And organizing tours with these electric vehicles. There were some other vehicles, but at the time there was not so much choice. And we actually tried to go out and let people drive these vehicles. So we organized displays where we, handed out leaflets on weekends and said, okay, we'll be displaying these cars. You can test drive them, because we were convinced you got to drive to be convinced. Yeah. And I remember one event where we organized this display, and I think, we handed out thousands of leaflets over the weeks. And so here came the event, and I think 3 people turned up. So, we had a good time, we met again, and, we are standing there, but it was shocking, and just showing how, showing the lack of interest potentially, or maybe the, people are too busy with their lives, I suppose, to do something like this. Or maybe we were not very good at marketing, also possible. But then also I realized there's actually no point trying to sell electric vehicles, because I continued that when I came to Britain in 2001.
Yeah.
We went to the Winchester Alternative Transport Day every year. I went to many shows. By that time, I now had 2 electric vehicles myself, and we had one from the university, which we converted to lithium-ion batteries at the time. And so we displayed them and tried to sell the electric vehicle, or the idea of the electric vehicle. But I realized there's no point trying to sell something if people can't really buy it.
Yeah.
And so I then became much more, well, what I then said is, okay, we really got to develop the technology, got to develop better electric vehicles, better cars, and only then you can sell it. So it's showing this catch-22 situation. Yes, people don't ask for it, so nobody's making it.
Yeah.
If nobody's making it, nobody's going to ask for it. And that's what I then did, and that's why we founded REAP Systems, to say, okay, there's the lithium-ion battery is around. It can make a really big difference because it is such a much better battery compared to lead acid or any of the others. And we developed the missing piece at the time. So there was the lithium-ion cells, they were manufactured. People know how to make cars and motors and inverters and all the bits that you need for an electric car. The missing piece was battery management system. And we developed an off-the-shelf battery management system at the time, which we sold to, I would say, about 150 projects worldwide for converting whether solar cars or making small vehicles, etc., etc.
Yeah. Was that difficult, setting up a business in sort of a new field, effectively? Was it hard to sort of find funding and customers and so on?
Well, at that time, funding was kind of impossible. At that time, there was no spin-out mechanism for the universities, unfortunately. I was relatively new in the UK still. This was in 2003, so I didn't really know anyone.
Yeah.
I didn't really know how funding mechanisms work, whom to approach. And I think without contacts, it's fantastically difficult. If you went to investors and said, well, here's an idea, they would say the questions I mentioned earlier: how much money is it going to make us by when?
Yeah. Which
nobody could answer at the time. And so we decided we'll go for the organic approach. We did start on our kitchen table. We had one charger from China blowing up on the kitchen table. And at some point I got so annoyed because every time we wanted to eat, we had to remove the stuff from the kitchen table and then eat. And so we then decided to eat on the sofa and keep working on the kitchen table. And till we got the first bigger contract, this is when we then converted our garage to a lab.
Yeah.
And then eventually we converted the whole house into a business. We employed people inside the house. And eventually that got really annoying because we were sharing everything basically with the employees.
You sort of no longer have a home, you just have a business.
Yeah, there was no home. I think the only home was the bedroom. We had a lock on the bedroom, so in case someone came in early from the employees, at least we didn't have to get up or something. So we then rented our first business premises. So it has been an organic growth company.
Yeah.
Since then for now 13 years. And we literally started with £100. So I think we always try to do a really good job for the customer.
Yeah.
Be very efficient and effective, make no mistakes, get it right first time. All the principles Toyota has been using themselves to become really big. To then make a bit of money, reinvest it into the business, and do something with that.
Yeah.
I think it started becoming really difficult when we had to pay for overheads, like business premises, employees.
Because that's quite a jump for any sort of business, isn't it? When you start off, and it's the founders are effectively working for almost nothing, and they're working from home, and it's just about getting the work done and trying to get someone to pay for it. But that's quite a big leap when you have to then start employing people and renting premises.
That's right.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, business. I mean, one of the reasons for founding REAP was when I spent my time at the university. Even the university didn't really see apart from my supervisor who supported me, but the university at a bigger scale didn't really see any innovation in electric vehicle technology or in battery technology at that time. They believed in fuel cells. And it wasn't really industrial research anyway. So for me, it wasn't really a place to stay.
Yeah.
I ended up, even for my research at the time, I ended up doing quite a lot of that work on my driveway at home in the rain, because there was no space at the university for the car anymore. Although that car got a lot of publicity at the time. It was the first serious hybrid electric plug-in vehicle with lithium-ion batteries, large lithium-ion batteries back in 2002, 2003.
Okay.
So it was on BBC. The press was very interested in this because simulation results showed that that could do about 250 miles per gallon fuel equivalent, including the electricity use. Right?
Wow.
So which is in urban traffic, which is fantastic.
Yeah. And that was a prototype vehicle?
There was a prototype, and I did a lot of simulation and testing on the large lithium-ion batteries, and I think I generated a lot of interest. In 2002, I gave a presentation in Korea on the Advanced Automotive Battery Electric Vehicle Symposium, that was, about the idea of using these large lithium-ion batteries for making serious hybrid electric vehicles with plug-in capability, and I call that concept peace of mind electric vehicle, because it is virtually electric vehicle. It's always driving electric, but you can also use it for longer journeys. And people were laughing at it at the time, but it is what BMW is now offering in their i3. It is what Mitsubishi is putting into the Outlander.
Yeah.
PHEV.
And in America, you've got things like the plug-in Prius and
the plug-in Prius is a similar, almost similar concept.
Yeah.
But when I presented it, that was after about half a year of research on what future mobility is going to look like. So it wasn't just a stupid idea. There was actually a lot of thinking behind it. But again, it shows that even scientists, Electric Vehicle Symposium is full of people with doctors and professors and high-level degrees doing nothing but research. Even scientists sometimes don't have a vision.
Yeah.
They don't get it.
They're too close to the problem.
Too close to the problem. And maybe nowadays some of them are even too close to just having a good life and earning good money.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, this is not what scientists should be about, in my opinion. So so then I saw lots of ideas. I think, like you said, before last time we met, you mentioned when you left university, you had all this enthusiasm, ideas, and want to change the world and change the place.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I saw the same during my PhD. I saw all these great ideas and this enthusiasm. I thought, why is none of this happening?
Yeah.
It's not just sustainability. There were other ideas as well, which could be good, but it doesn't happen. So having been a soldier, then having done a PhD, so knowing nothing about business at all. Money to me was basically like a foreign word, a foreign word almost, from a different language. I thought, well, it can't be that difficult. Let's start a business and let's try.
I think sometimes you need to be a bit naive in order to make that leap.
Well, I think if I hadn't been naive, now I wouldn't start a business again, although now it would be easier because now I know a few things a bit better. But I thought, well, it can't be that difficult. I want to find out why that is difficult. What's difficult about it? I thought it must be difficult because otherwise it would happen more often.
Yeah.
Yes? Yeah. There would be more good things. So I just deliberately wanted to find out what's difficult about starting a business. And not only I wanted to start a business, but also I wanted to start a business that works differently and that does sustainable things. So sustainability was the key mission, really, of Reap Systems. Or basically questioning status quo, never being happy with what we've got. There must be a better way of doing things. This is really the foundation for Reap Systems. This is what keeps us going. Yeah,
in the pushing those boundaries.
Yeah, so that's what we did. I think nowadays I know a little bit better what's difficult. I can't quite put my finger on it because if I could, then one could do something about it.
Yeah,
more easily. It's still a little bit difficult to understand. And yeah, I think I've always been quite good at seeing other people's perspective. So I can see some of the movements the government is taking. And I think, yes, it makes sense from their point of view. They are actually trying to do something about it.
Yeah.
I think it's just not working.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work like this.
Do you think there are other things that maybe governments need to do in order to sort of almost level the playing field? So some people are talking about, carbon tax or something like that effectively makes renewable energy cost competitive. So instead of subsidizing renewables, you tax pollution to sort of balance things out. What's your thoughts on those types of approaches?
Well, there are things that have helped, I guess. Tightening up some emission rules can help.
Yeah.
Some taxes can help, taxes on fuel, etc. But generally, I think one of the issues is that the system, so with the governments as we have it at the moment, is hundreds, if not thousands. Well, it's very old.
Yeah,
it's a very old system. But many things have happened in the meantime. Nowadays we do have social media. It's easier to get to the masses. There are great systems like change.org, etc., where people can get together and do something for a good cause.
Yeah,
that didn't exist. 6 years ago, didn't even exist.
Yeah, I think. And they've had a lot of impact.
And you have lots of charities around where people basically vote for what they want to see happening. So to a certain extent, I think the government feels a little bit, I don't want to say redundant, but many of the functions the government is taking lots of tax money for are maybe not really necessary anymore nowadays.
Yeah.
But of course, they don't want to make themselves redundant. But I think they should.
Yeah.
I think they should. The taxes are too high, and the taxes work in the wrong way. I think someone seriously needs to rethink the tax system from ground up. I'm not normally a friend of big and fundamental changes. I quite like the idea of continuous improvements. And I think it could work. I just see some of these improvements going in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
At the moment, they are not really improvements. For example, this is just thinking really out of the box. Value added tax. What's actually the point? Penalizing someone for adding value.
Yeah.
If you think about it.
If you take the wording literally,
Well, it is literally.
Then that's what it is.
Because what a business should be doing is they should take something coming in, adding value to it, and selling it on.
Yeah.
This is what the business should be about. Business should not be about making someone rich and making someone else poor. It should literally be about adding value and doing that in a very efficient and effective way, for the benefit of the customer.
Yeah.
And in return for that business, for the vision and belief that was necessary to build that business, that investor should be getting a return on investment, which is basically paying for his pension. And I think many, many years ago, this is what businesses were about. And there are still some businesses, in my opinion, that work that way.
Yeah.
I think, for example, that Toyota works that way. And they have got ingrained in their principles, some principles saying, first we focus on the value that we're adding.
Yeah.
And then we see how we can make money with it. And I think this is how sustainability could work, because eventually we all need sustainable stuff.
Yeah.
So the market is as big as we have people around on this planet. So nobody needs to ask how big the market is. That is the market size. All we got to figure out is how we get there and how we produce a return on investment. I think it's a much better way of looking at it, the way Toyota works, and some other companies, often family businesses for some reason. Then trying to look, before you even have an idea, you try to think about how you can make yourself rich. I think that's not going to work for very much longer. So I like the Toyota principles. They're ingrained in our principles as well. They make a lot of sense to me. They are foundations of sustainability, in my opinion. They've got a decent way of dealing with employees and people. They got to work, and they got to work hard, and they have to do a good job, but everyone gets given a chance.
And I think it's very much that you work hard for the benefit of everybody within the organization, but then in return, the organization looks after you.
That's it.
So it's very much a two-way relationship.
It is a nice relationship. But this value-added tax, that I think is just an example of something that doesn't really seem to make sense.
Yeah.
If you think about it, I think the way the government should be looking at this is saying, okay, we are providing a platform on which you can do business, and the UK or whatever government we are talking about is providing a certain platform because they think this is a good platform to work on.
Yeah.
And if it's a good platform, they should be getting something in return. But maybe I wouldn't call it a tax. It's almost like providing a service, actually.
Yeah.
So instead of calling it value-added tax, they should call it value-added service provider, for example. Then what they could be doing, this honestly is probably not going to happen in the next year, obviously, but it's just thinking outside the box, what should happen. So we rename value-added tax, and obviously got to be much lower as well, because our crowdfunding is on IndieGogo. They take 8%. Yes, they don't take 20.
Yeah.
Yes, it's only 8. Other things that should happen is everything that makes a contribution to the, is to the benefit of the society should be getting something, some subsidy from the government, a small subsidy, just to help that. And everything that is harming the greater good and the society, they should be paying for it. Yeah. So say, if you are flying around, that has got lots of impact on many, many things. I'm sure with nowadays technology, someone can work out what that impact is, ideally efficiently.
Yeah, I think people already have.
It's noise, it's pollution, it's oil consumption, etc., etc. And since that isn't paid for in our normal market forces, and I can explain this in a minute, the government should be saying, okay, this costs that and that much. Yeah. And that would automatically, and again, that is a service they are providing, so they can take a cut. That's fine.
Yeah, and there's a clear logic to it.
There's a clear logic.
There's a cost to society of people doing those things, causing noise and air pollution and so on. So someone has to pay for that. So it should be the people causing those problems. Yeah. And so the tax is very fair in that sense.
Yeah, so I think that could be the modern tax, and I don't know which country can do this first. But
probably Bhutan or something.
Bhutan, got to be maybe a small test somewhere on a tiny island. Maybe once the Isle of Wight is independent, then they can do it, of course. But I think it's an interesting thought, and maybe when people do the continuous improvement on their tax system and on the whole government system, they can bear this in mind and maybe walk in the right direction. That's much easier, of course, than making a really big change. Yeah. Because the big changes are always a big risk. Yeah. And they can go really wrong. And we live still in a very stable world. Well, at least here in the UK, we don't have any big wars right on our doorstep. People can go to work in the morning, enjoy a nice day on the weekends, etc., compared to some other countries. So we shouldn't complain too much. Yeah. And I think it's a big risk to make a too big change. So my radical thinking wasn't a serious suggestion, but I think...
It's more about setting a direction.
Yeah, I think whenever they make a change, they should really say, well, we should stop increasing the VAT, because it makes no sense.
Yeah.
Yes. And the way we are taxing businesses at the moment, I think doesn't make sense much either, because basically it's very hard for business to grow without outside investment.
Yeah.
It's kind of, the system is geared towards making sure that the people who always were rich can stay rich.
Yeah.
Which is fine if they build up their empire themselves, like Alan Sugar did from nothing. But I think he would agree that, we all should continue to have a chance. I think this is how America grew very big, and that's what America is famous about.
Make it easier at the sort of the starting out level for entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I think giving everyone that chance.
Yeah.
Not by giving them money, but I would say it would already be sufficient if we wouldn't make it deliberately difficult.
Yeah. So just stop putting barriers in the way.
Yes. So, let's not put... I mean, sometimes I understand where this comes from. Let's imagine, like you said, you left university, you had all these great ideas. And some people give up on these ideas really early, didn't they? Yes? They say, we want to make the world a better place.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's probably fair to say most people have given up on them before they even graduate.
Yeah, so some give up really early, and then they completely forget about it, and then they are busy with children and, paying up them, paying for the mortgage, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Others might try for a little while, and they may fail, because it is very, very hard. And I would just ask anyone who has failed not to see it as a failure. It is not a failure, because it is fantastically hard. As long as someone has tried, no matter for how long, even if it's only 5 minutes, great, you've tried. But please, if you have, how can we call it, if we don't want to call it failed? If you have decided not to continue, please don't make someone else's life harder just because you didn't continue.
Yeah.
Because I think this is what's happening sometimes. I see this happening. If someone else seems to be more successful than you are, don't make it hard for him.
Yeah.
Support him. Because it needs people working together on this. And otherwise it's not going to happen. And another big issue I have seen when I founded this electric vehicle club in Germany is, say, you've got 99 or 99.9% of the population at that time who drove a normal car, probably even more than that, 0.9.
Yeah.
Let's say. And they didn't care at all about their emissions and their fuel consumption. At that time, that was 1998. And then you have this tiny group of environmentally conscious people driving an electric vehicle, and they battle amongst each other against, you shouldn't be driving this electric vehicle because it consumes a little bit more energy than my electric vehicle. But someone bought a hybrid. Oh, this is really bad. You shouldn't be buying a hybrid. You should be buying a bicycle. So basically, this tiny group,
they're so obsessed with the idea of perfection, that they can't actually
have no impact.
Actually achieve a step forward.
Yes. So I think anyone who's doing a little bit better. I mean, even if someone says, okay, I bought the eco version of my Vauxhall Corsa, not the power version. Great, you've done something. Yeah, it's a step in the right direction. We have to, not unify, but we have to get the people together who have thought about it. Yeah, yes, at least, because there are far more people not even thinking about it, or even deliberately saying, well, oh shit, this green stuff is coming, I better buy another V8 now because you never know whether I can have fun again in 5 years.
Yeah, last chance.
Okay.
Yeah.
But even there, I mean, people might buy a V8 if they say, okay, I've got this V8, I use it once in a month because I love it.
It's a toy. Yeah.
It's a toy, but all the rest of my life I'm using a bicycle. Great, they've thought about it.
Yeah.
I think we have to get people to start thinking about it, start being interested in it. And I think the industry has to provide means of stimulating that interest. Here are two examples for that. I think Toyota again has done a fantastic job with their display. Yes, you can have a competition saying, let's try and do regenerative braking as good as I can. I get more stars.
Yeah.
I think this sort of things is really helpful. A negative example was our first electric vehicle that we bought, this tiny one-seater I mentioned.
Yeah.
It had no display whatsoever, just speed and how full is my battery. And I thought, this is wrong, because people who buy this sort of technology, they want to know what's going on. They're interested in what's going on. How can I extend my range? How do I have to drive?
Yeah, those early adopters are really fascinated.
So this was one of my first developments at the time. I developed something called L-Man. It was an electric vehicle. Why was it called L-Man? I don't know. But it was an open source project at the time. Basically, people could build the same thing.
Yeah.
And there were many people then putting it into their electric vehicles. And we even had group evenings on the weekends where I showed people how to solder and how to make stuff. And we make these elements and put them into our vehicles so that we would get at least, what's my current, it's not fuel consumption, there's energy consumption.
Yeah.
Per kilometer and stuff, so that they can optimize their driving style. And so that was a negative example, I think, for the same. Same topic. I think information is very important, and there's a lack of information nowadays. I mean, if you want to buy an eco-friendly car, which one would you buy? Nowadays, it's a bit more obvious. You can buy any electric car; they're all quite eco-friendly, obviously. But if you wanted to buy a normal car, it's difficult to work that out. There is no. I mean, this is something, for example, the government could be doing, in my opinion. Why do I have to buy a Which magazine, which is more or less the only test comparison magazine I can go to? If I just wanted to buy a good product, I think it could be a service the government could at least be supporting, so that I can get this magazine for free or the information for free, presented in a nice way, because this is what democracy is all about, making the right decisions by many people, but that requires information presented in a nice way so it's easy to absorb.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that probably ties in these days with sort of open data and governments just opening up data that they have in formats that mean that even if they're not going to do it, make it accessible so that a developer can go take that data for free and put that online, display it, and other people can then find it. And there are some cases of the government doing that in a few sort of pilot projects, but I think we need a lot more of it, because the government does have so much data on stuff that would be useful. And
it would probably be a relatively cheap service. I mean, if you compare it with all the money that is pumped into innovation, it costs the taxpayer a lot of money.
Yeah.
I mean, and these projects are really, really slow, and the overheads are phenomenal, and the output is probably not very good for how much it costs the taxpayer, actually. And in other areas, I think the government is trying to break up status quo, which I mentioned earlier. The status quo is one of the issues, I think, for not making any changes. They are trying to break up status quo. For example, inheritance tax is, I think, designed to. Well, maybe they haven't thought that much about it, and they just want some income stream. This is what some people say, but I think it's also designed to break status quo. But it comes with lots of problems, because, say, if you are investing in a sustainable way because you want your family to be successful, like Toyota, for example, did, it's a family business. Yes. Then what's wrong about it? Why should they be paying? What's the tax rate now? Inheritance tax 45% or something in that order, because you can't really afford to pay that if you have a business. If you think about REAP Systems, now we are building up this business. I mean, we don't have kids, I have to say, maybe fortunately, but obviously you build up the business because you want to pass it then on maybe to your family, and you got to make sure that your family is then capable of running that business in a sustainable way. And I don't think there's anything wrong about this. And Toyota has done exactly that. Bosch has done the same thing. Why on earth does the government then want to take 40% of the value of that business? Because where's that money going to come from?
Yeah.
Who can pay for these 45%?
And that then
without
impacts
selling
on
half
the whole
of the business
and the staff that work for the business and the customers that
So
take value from that business.
So they invent something where they can break the status quo, but then of course it's causing lots of issues somewhere else, and then they got to invent some really complicated mechanisms of allowing a business like, well, there is not really Bosch, it's not a UK company, but in Germany you've got the same problem, but a company like Bosch to continue to employ thousands and thousands of people and operating.
But a lot of these rules, they're sort of one-size-fits-all sledgehammers that actually, they might work in a sort of standardized case, but then there's lots of use cases where actually they're inappropriate.
Yeah. So I think instead of doing this sort of complicated mechanisms, and the tax system is fantastically complicated, that's why we need all these accountants and so on and so forth. As much as I like our accountant, it is an overhead, which got to be paid for. The time that goes into this is quite high, and it takes away the focus from what we should be doing. So once a year you're focusing on, how can we most tax efficiently reinvest or now buy some stuff so that the profit isn't too high, and you're putting the business at a risk at that time, because ideally you have a reserve as a business. But in order to build up a reserve, I got to make a profit first. If I make a profit, I pay a lot of tax, so I get penalized for trying to build a foundation and grow my business.
No, I think that's true. I mean, I think everyone who runs a business experiences that you're always trying to navigate the system and jump through hoops. First of all, just not to get in trouble. And then secondarily to actually, make a profit and be able to continue and grow the business on an ongoing basis. And like you said, you're paying for services like accountancy, which and to some extent, legal advice and so on. Some of it's useful, but a lot of it is really just because you kind of have no choice, and it is a tax.
It is a tax, and there is I think a very good business consultant in Germany. His name is Reinhard Sprenger, and I got interested in his stuff because his first book was about motivation, and then he wrote many other books which are all very interesting, thinking quite a lot outside the box. And one of the books is about the trust system. If we want to live a life without any trust, we'll be absolutely stuck in overheads, right? Just making sure nothing can go wrong, everything is controlled, penalized, and everyone follows the rules. And I think at the moment we are heading that way a little bit, and this is why the tax system becomes very inefficient. Basically, there are people doing bad stuff, but if we design the system around the few people who are doing bad stuff, then we end up with a system where everyone is doing bad stuff, because the system is designed for people who want to do bad things. The system got to be designed for people and trusting that people want to do good business.
And that the majority of people do. And the majority,
So, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy otherwise. And it's very expensive to run and operate that system. So, so here we go. So if there is status quo, if some people are passing on lots of money to their children and they keep messing things up, fine, just that's gonna happen. We can't fully stop it. We should be focusing on the people that are trying to do good business. And I think this is how our conversation started. At the moment, this is very, very difficult because the system is trying to stop people who are doing bad business. But it's unfortunately also stopping people who are doing good business.
And not necessarily even stopping all the bad business. So,
no, it's not stopping the bad business because they know how to do it, and
they know how to find the loopholes. So
because they don't have to focus on adding value.
So
they focus on finding the loopholes. Whereas I should be focusing on making at the moment hybrid drive systems for the boats, for example, and not focusing on how can I do this most tax efficiently and not getting penalized by God knows what. Another big issue I came across are insurances, actually, because and banks, so the normal finance methods, because they are automatically supporting status quo, because everything that has got a lot of for anything they've got data, they can give you a price, and it's usually quite low unless the data show there's something very risky. The fewer data they got, the less likely they are gonna insure it or give you, or
they either won't do it or they'll charge you a lot for it.
So I remember my first days of running REAP systems, we wanted to find an insurance, and I thought it's a no-brainer because, like everyone else, to find a car insurance isn't that difficult, for example. So I assumed it would be similar for business insurance, and I had to find that I came across some very arrogant people who said, they didn't even quote us.
Right.
Yeah. So they wouldn't even come along for a meeting because it's an hour of their time.
Yeah.
Obviously, with our turnover of £5,000 a year, whatever we had in the first year,
then they just think
didn't
it's
look
not
that
worth
interesting. So, so I think we were actually quite lucky to find a really good insurance broker who has been supporting us since. But now, in hindsight, I understand it was actually his investment. He believed in me.
Yeah.
Because when he came along first to spend an hour of his time plus driving, the amount of business I could offer to him was virtually nothing.
Yeah, but he could see the potential that
your
business could grow, and
he was happy to invest his time, and I think this is something every entrepreneur has to bear in mind. You can't take anything for granted. You will have many people who either believe in you or don't, and if they don't, you won't be able to have any business.
Yeah.
I think with banks it's more difficult nowadays because the big banks, there's nobody making any decision. We don't even have a bank manager anymore. They've been made redundant. We've basically been
It's just a sort
removed.
of computerized decision-making system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there were some reasons why it's difficult to do sustainable innovation, but I think any entrepreneur would agree that to start a business is already very, very difficult, and the chances of success are, I think the chances of survival are about 1 to 10. The chances of real success are very small, and this is why often investors, or this is why business agents or any investor really wants a really large return on investment, because it's a high risk for them. They're not running the business themselves, so they're not really that much in control, and you just got to say a wrong word when you're talking to a customer, you can mess up everything and they can't stop it. So that explains why business angels always want a really high cut. So I can understand that. But of course, for any sustainable innovation, you can't really have this big cut. And the reason for that is that sustainable innovation, my definition of that is that you are replacing existing technologies with something that is more sustainable. What we don't want to do is we don't want to invent new technologies, because I think we already got enough stuff.
Yeah.
Yes, and some other people are inventing new things all the time, because this is what the normal innovation is all about. But I think we have enough stuff, and I didn't want to add any to that, so I wanted to make the stuff that we've got more sustainable, and I would call that sustainable innovation. Mm-hmm. And the difficulty with that, of course, is that you are immediately competing with something that is already around, is made in high volumes, is available at low prices, everyone knows how it works, and everyone actually likes it. Everyone liked the car as it was.
Yeah, and they already have certain expectations in terms of performance and price and so on.
Especially price, performance, quality. All the expectations are there. It's in full-scale production. And I have tried convincing car manufacturers for many years to do something and do this and do that. And they don't, they either do something properly or not.
Yeah.
This is what most businesses do. Someone said businesses are designed to keep ideas and people out. they've got a big firewall, try and make sure that they're not doing anything they don't want to do. So they won't do it.
Yeah.
So whatever Elon Musk did with his Teslas, I think, is fantastic, because it has really changed the perception of the electric vehicle. When I ran around back in 1998 and 2003 and so forth, talking about electric vehicles, people in their mind, they had a milk float and the Sinclair C5.
Yeah, and I hear Americans often saying, that electric car means golf cart to them.
Golf cart, yes. So, and that obviously puts it into a certain bracket, not very sexy, and so people wouldn't buy it. And he really turned that around.
Yeah.
And I think the only reason why, he's a very shrewd entrepreneur. Great stuff. And I think he likes the thrill of doing things where everyone else says this is impossible. You can't take the banks on. You can't take the car manufacturers on, but he does, and it's great. And I think it's it's also a lot of inspiration for people to do it. And but I think for the electric vehicle, he used his own money, even though it was 200 million.
Yes, so his first couple of ventures were software. So effectively, you can start it with nothing if you know what you're doing.
Yes, in theory at least.
In theory, yeah. He made a lot of money out of Zip2 and PayPal, but starting a car company, that needs. Yeah. There's no getting around it. That needs serious money.
But I think the only reason, one of the reasons why Tesla works, and I think will work, is because he took his own money.
Yeah.
He knows himself, he can trust himself, he's got the vision, and often a vision is very difficult to communicate. The vision itself may be easy to communicate, but how you ended up with that vision in order to convince someone that is a good vision is very difficult to communicate, and I have always struggled in doing that. People just lost me somewhere. They said, well, I don't know, why should we be making electric cars? And I think for him it was possible to do this because it was his own money. If he had gone to an investor and say, I've got this idea here, no matter how well you present it, you would always fail at that point when they asked, what's your market size and when is it going to happen, and how on earth do you want to compete with the existing car manufacturers? I think this is where you would lose them. They would say, forget about it.
Because when you look back to the beginning of Tesla, you'd say that, well, everything they said they were going to do was impossible. To start a car company from nothing.
Impossible. Yeah. And I have a few friends working for VW and Audi in Germany, and they've spent all their life on some tiny detail, and they are so convinced that it is impossible for someone to copy it because they spend all their life on this detail, and it's this massive amount of information in the car companies. And I thought it was impossible, but I think Tesla has shown that it isn't impossible.
Yeah.
Also, Toyota has shown many years ago that it wasn't impossible to become world's #1 car manufacturer from nothing, although Ford was already big when they started.
Yeah.
And I think what we might be seeing is that the Chinese are going to show us that...
Yeah, I think that's something a lot of people can't see coming. I think,
But I do know how much the Chinese are investing in renewable energies, in electric vehicle technologies, in battery technologies, because they know they have to.
Yeah, and it's interesting actually. Even now, BYD, which I'm sure you know, they're a Chinese company which is now selling vehicles here. There's buses in London, BYD buses, electric buses in London. They've just opened a factory in California. So they're doing things ahead of us and selling back to us, which I think we're maybe in the West a little bit arrogant that we think that our technology is always the best.
And I think this arrogance is very dangerous because I like the Chinese. I've been to China and they are funny and good to be with, etc. But every culture is very close to itself first.
Yeah, of course.
Yes. Yeah. And if you look at the way we have been treating, our Western cultures, I say European cultures now. We are still before the vote, so we can say Europe here. if you see how we treat other countries, then you'd say, well, this is actually quite shit for them. For example, I've got lots of connections in Brazil. My grandfather started a business in Brazil many years ago, tier 1 supplier to the automotive industry. They have been struggling because what they make will not be required anymore in a few years. Unfortunately, my grandfather has died many years ago and isn't around anymore, and the business isn't. I've got virtually no connection to that business anymore. But I visited them and I wanted to help them a little bit and help myself as well by introducing, let's say, hybrid buses in Sao Paulo, which would make a lot of sense because Sao Paulo is very, very polluted, and they just had some big events, or are having, and I thought that would be a good opportunity. But I found out that is virtually impossible because in Brazil they just make this stuff.
Right. Okay.
The innovation is coming from the European companies and the US companies, so like VW, Fiat. The innovation got to come from there. If the Brazilians were trying to do the innovation themselves, they will be threatened to. Basically, they would say, well, then we can't really buy from you, can we? They're deliberately stopping them to innovate.
And they have too much of a dependency to be able to take that risk.
And there's too much of a dependency to risk that. So they decided that they can't really mess around with the existing industry, with the status quo, because they've got to pay all their big bills for all their employees and so forth and so forth. Because you can't build up big reserves thanks to the tax system. So there are some closing circuits, hopefully, in this discussion here. And so this is what European countries are doing and companies are doing in order to keep our own jobs nice and safe and warm, so that we can have all a nice life. But somewhere else in this world, someone is suffering, and we don't know this. You only find out when you want to do something and go somewhere and say, well, it should be possible. Let's do this. But you're stuck. You can't do it. Now, taking this back to the Chinese. If this world starts turning around, that we are not really doing the innovation here anymore, then the Chinese are doing the innovation, what are we going to do?
That's the big question,
isn't it?
And this comes back to what you're saying about adding value.
What are we then?
What are we adding?
I think we will, because we cannot just sell stuff. That doesn't work. We can't just patent things here. Stop everyone else in Europe or in the UK making the stuff I've just invented, and I import it from China, sell it on here, because from time to time we also got to sell something back to them. But I know what it is at the moment. At the moment, it's mainly making them pay lots of money for being at a UK university. But that's a short-lived.
That's not a long-term plan.
That's not a long-term solution, I think. But if we are not careful, then we are not leading innovation anymore. I think we should be democratizing this. So we should be allowing people in Brazil to innovate, for example. I think the best people should innovate. It doesn't matter where they are from. But this whole globalization is there. No matter how much some people think, yes, let's leave Europe and let's leave the world, ideally. We have the globalization, and I think we should try to make the best out of it by working together. And there are some platforms nowadays through the World Wide Web that allow us to do a lot. And I love what, as I said, Change.org, for example, have done. They're fantastic platforms. And also I think the crowdfunding platforms are a very good idea.
I think they're really starting to change things, because there's a lot of small businesses now that have really good ideas, and there's customers at the other end who want those ideas. But in a conventional sort of scenario, they wouldn't be able to get from point A to point B. And crowdfunding really
at a much higher cost.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas crowdfunding, it's marketing and funding and market research, sort of all rolled into one. Because if people want it, they'll put in money, and at the same time they're sharing it, so you're getting
Yeah.
sort of viral marketing at the same time. So it's
So
good.
I think what would be nice is actually a community of people who want to do something, who can share ideas, help each other. And I had an idea down this line many years ago where I thought, well, one issue in business is trust.
Yeah.
Because if you trust someone, you can just give them a phone call, say yeah, and you know it's going to happen. You know they're not going to rip you off.
Yeah.
If we could establish, maybe someone is going to do it, someone who's listening to this, because I'm pretty busy at the moment. I haven't got time for it. It's almost like a sustainability stamp on your business, saying, right, we follow Toyota principles. We want to do sustainable things. We don't want to rip off customers. We want to add value, and then you go and you see, okay, they are part of this group. I can trust them. I'll do business with them. I know how they tick. It's an easy decision.
Yeah.
And also then maybe have regular meetings and start having a community of people that
sharing knowledge and experiences.
Where business starts to be fun. I mean, another observation I've got in life is that people separate business from private life.
Yeah.
And I think that doesn't make much sense, because this is not what the human race was designed to do. I mean, business is a great part of your life, isn't it? You spend, in the last weeks we spent about 16 hours working every day and the weekend. So other people spend maybe 8 hours working a day, but it is 8 hours prime time of your life.
Yeah.
And so it isn't business and private isn't separate. It is part of everyone's life. And I was always hoping I could start a business where we can generate some direct quality of life. So people perform, people have fun at the same time, and feel good and add value. And I think that would be fantastic to achieve. We are still a little bit struggling with this because of some things I don't want to discuss now, because I would definitely take it too far. But it's got to do with the education system a little.
But is that coming back into sort of the employment side of things? You were saying earlier that it can be quite hard to find people who actually want to work on projects that are going to make the world better, and actually accept that there is a compromise that they need to make in terms of their salary, for example. But do you think that there are things you can do as a company to sort of slightly get around that by creating a good quality of life and a great working environment where you're going to enjoy yourself at work and work on something meaningful? So it's not just about 8 hours a day, I'm just there to make money.
No. Yeah, I think firstly it's got to have a meaning, the business, and it would have been very important, but we didn't do this before we started the business, to work out what Reap Systems is about. What is your business about? And to communicate this in very simple terms, so that when you then employ people, they know what you're about and they come to you because they want to work for you, and not because I need a job, or I haven't got a job, So, and we made that mistake, and I found it very difficult to distill this. But I am hoping, if we can create a better community of friends and people working together, that it's maybe more easy, because for an outsider it's easier. If you're inside you and you've got all these complicated thoughts in your head, sometimes you don't see the wood for trees, but someone outside might just listen to you and say, well, this is what you're all about.
Yeah, completely.
And instead of doing this, I paid about £3,000 for marketing consultant. He did a fantastic job. He distilled it into this in pursuit of a better way. It's great, and it certainly was worthwhile the time and probably the money if you have it.
Yeah.
But when you start a business, I mean, we didn't even have £10 initially. Not to speak 3,000.
You've got to do everything yourself.
Yeah. So, and it comes down to having the right sort of friends and families. And I think when my mother died with cancer, at that time I looked a lot into how to overcome cancer, how to overcome diseases, and it's all about finding out what you are about
Yeah.
and doing that. And to a certain extent, you have to drop maybe some friends, and you might have to drop some family members, and work with those people you want to deal with.
Yeah.
I think that's very important. And I think I am hoping this can work for business. So I am seeing that now the people we are starting to employ now, they come to REAP because of who we are.
Yeah.
So I think it's going in the right.
And then because of that, hopefully that starts to build a culture within
it starts to build a culture. I still believe the education system got to be reformed, though, because people are quite old when they leave university. 25, 26.
Yeah.
We should remember that human beings were only designed to survive for 30 years initially. Most people only got 30, 31 years and then they died.
Yeah.
Nowadays people get much older nowadays, but to have someone coming out of the education system at the age of 25 or 26 and not knowing what life is about is a big mistake.
Yeah.
Because they think they deserve so and so much money per month.
And often that's because that's what they've been told by
That's what they've been
university.
told before going to university or at the university. They've also been told that they are the top of the top because they've got a university degree. For some reason, people are forgetting that I think the government's target was having 80% with a university degree, so it's not automatically top of the top anymore. So, you're just one of everyone. And unfortunately, they don't really have much life experience or business experience, and it is very hard for a small business to get them there. We are not Rolls-Royce who can afford to do a 2-year training program. They got to come here and start
hit the ground running, really.
But and start making contribution within a couple of months or fast, ideally, and ideally not screw up things too much, because that's the risk. The risk is they are all making a contribution, but they can make some really big mistakes somewhere, and then that can cost you a lot of money. And then you make a loss, because especially on sustainable innovation, the profit margins are tiny. In the car industry, typical profit margin is in the order of 8%.
Which is really small.
So,
especially when you consider that it's also an industry that requires a huge amount of investment. In machinery
and innovation
and
R&D. And you got to pay for all of this with these 8%. I mean, this is what people don't realize. So the automotive industry, in my opinion, earns a great respect, or actually any established industry. I mean, there are some that don't earn my respect, but that's something else.
That's another conversation.
That's something else. But generally, it's a this well-established how would you say, industries. It's hard to break in with something sustainable. People don't want change. Like I've in the ports, for example, there are straddle carriers. They lift up a container. Well, they've got a big generator, about 1,000 horsepower generator.
Wow.
Everything is electric. So
these are what we've got over in Southampton.
In Southampton, any port, have got many of them. And they've got electric motors lifting the container. These electric motors are using electricity from a diesel generator, because the straddle carriers are on rubber wheels, rubber tires, so they're not on the mains. So they need their own generation. So electricity is generated with a generator. They use it, for example, to drive around and lift the container. When they let the container down, they use braking. So the electric motors then go into generator mode. And then it's kind of slowing the container down when it comes down. But now guess what with this energy is done? So basically, every time the heavy container is coming down, they release all the energy they needed to lift it up in the first place. That is actually with a very good efficiency, because there's not much friction in that system. It's straight up and down.
And actually there's I've forgotten what it's called, but there's a new tower they're building in Brighton. It's a viewing platform, and it goes up. I think it's electric. It goes up, and then on its way back down,
Yeah.
it uses regenerative braking to store energy and
Yes.
send it back up again. So the same kind of principle you'd have thought should be.
Should be, yes. I think trains do regen braking because they're connected to the grid, so you use the grid as a big storage mechanism.
Yeah.
But the straddle carriers, what are they doing with it? What do you think?
I don't know.
You don't want to know.
I don't want to know.
They've got big resistors on big heat sinks, and they burn it.
You just turn it to heat.
Yeah, they turn it into heat. So it's a no-brainer, in my opinion, to make them hybrid, isn't it? Because it's already an electric system, and all they need is a battery that stores the energy. And there were a few companies doing this. There is a very successful project, obviously as usual in Japan. So we know how much energy you can save.
Yeah.
And I calculated, for example, for one port close by, that they would be saving about £1 million in terms of diesel every year.
Wow.
So why are they not doing it?
That's the big question, right? That's the mystery.
It's not a mystery. I've asked, and the answer is simple. We don't know what's going to come next year.
Right. So they don't want to invest a lot of money up front.
Yeah. So it's a confidence problem.
Yeah.
Investment is a confidence problem. They don't know, are they going to, is the port going to be reduced in size? Will the ships go to another port next year? And for that reason, they don't invest. So it's basically a zero risk approach to this. And they've been doing this now for 15 years. They don't invest in buildings either, so et cetera, et cetera. It really doesn't seem to be a business, in my opinion, because business is about risk.
Yeah.
And if someone isn't taking risk, it's not worth the business. But there doesn't seem to be much of a competition. Well, actually, there is competition. That's what they are afraid of. That's why they're not investing.
But they're not in. Yeah, it's sort of back to front because they're afraid of the other ports or the other countries where things may go, and or I guess potentially even other modes of transport.
But
but eventually they're going to decay if they don't.
Yes.
Invest in themselves.
Yeah. So, but they've got employees as well. So it's not just one person making that sort of decision. And here's maybe something I would like to say, which is also coming from Reinhard Sprenger, which is the business consultant. It's all about self-responsibility. Yeah. If everyone is responsible for what happens at your workplace. Sometimes we call up a supplier and then people start to apologize and say, yeah, but I'm only the secretary here and I don't really, this is not my fault. And then I say, but you work for that business. Yeah. You get your money from this business, so you must be happy with it. You can't just say, oh, this is a shit business and I'm just the secretary. If you're not happy with where you work, change that. Yeah. This is what self-responsibility is about.
Yeah, and it's not just a case of I'm just the secretary, because actually the reason you're there is because you add value to the business and you add value to customers. Yeah. Otherwise, there'd be no point in you.
So I think we all can do something about not only about the sustainability, but also about our own unhappiness. Yeah. Which is what self-responsibility is. So don't be unhappy and continue. If you're unhappy, change it. Yeah. Or even
as Vanita was always saying, if you're not a tree. If you're not happy, just get up and move.
Change it. I know it's not easy to change, but there are people who have done it, and just talk to them, join one of the groups, and then it will be easier, I think. And if more people do it, it will definitely be easier. The more people just stick to what they do because they don't like changing it, the more difficult it is for everyone to change it. But the bigger appeal is, if you decide not to be self-responsible and stick to your job, do support others who are making the big jump, because it is a jump. If someone is leaving his job because they want to do something more meaningful or something more sustainable, I think it deserves support from others.
Yeah, and it's risky, it's scary, and those people need encouragement.
Yeah. I mean, we don't have kids, and one of the reasons for that was that I said, well, I want to take risks in life, and I don't really want my children to suffer from me taking this risk and working crazy hours. And we have lots of friends who have got lots of children, and I understand they cannot take the same risks I can take. Yeah. but it was my conscious decision. It's not that, and hopefully it was their conscious decision to have children. But they shouldn't be stopping us now. It would be nice if they could be supporting us and saying, it's great what you do, because what we do is supposed to be, it's probably their children are going to benefit from what we are trying to achieve.
Yeah.
It's because it's their future.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So.
Okay.
Interesting stuff.
Yeah. All right. Well, shall we wrap up with you quickly, just explaining what Project Venice is and where people can find information about your crowdfunding campaign?
Yes, I mean, we have worked a lot in the electric vehicle industry, supported lots of projects in the past, usually worked as a supplier for others who are, running projects. Last year I thought, well, let's do our own project, because we understand a lot about the whole hybrid system. And in the marine markets, I think the uptake of clean technologies has been very, very slow.
Yeah.
We start to see the successes in the automotive markets now, but the marine market is lacking far behind, and the pollution from boats is actually much worse than we think. For example, Southampton is one of the most polluted cities in the whole of the UK. It's actually more polluted than what the World Health Organization is recommending.
Right.
Many people don't know this, and it is to a great extent. This is because of the cruise ships, of course, and boat traffic. If you think about cities like Venice or any water city, that have got thousands of boats with diesel engines running around, and these engines don't have particle filters. These engines don't have catalytic converters. They pump out often even heavy diesel, the larger ships,
right,
which is particularly full of sulfur, etc.
Yeah.
So what comes out of their exhaust is really bad, and it's polluting the city. So, and in the marine market, or for boats, the hybrid system, or sometimes the pure electric system, like for Amsterdam, pure electric boats make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
For Venice, hybrid boats make a lot of sense because you have got some faster and longer runs, and that's where the batteries would then have to be far too big. And that's where the pollution is not such a big issue because it's not in the middle of the town. But then you have also some runs around the little canals in the town where you definitely don't want noise or pollution.
Yeah.
Next to imagine there's this young couple, romantic day out on a gondola, and someone singing in the back of the gondola, and then there's this stinking taxi boat right next to you, switching their diesel on, which isn't tuned nicely and puts out a lot of pollution into your face. So you can imagine this. And so we thought it's worthwhile developing a drop-in hybrid solution, because boat builders are usually quite small businesses. They cannot afford, large R&D expenses or big research projects. They buy stuff in, they got to put it into the boat. It's got to be really simple. Most of the hybrid systems that have happened were big government-funded projects with millions of pounds, converting one or two vessels with lots of research elements, certainly not plug and play. So we want to develop a plug and play hybrid engine which can be put into any boat with a stern drive. We'll start in Venice because there are more than 20,000 boats around in that area, and it just makes a lot of sense, also in terms of publicity. But as I've mentioned before, it is a massive risk for us to do this project. It costs us a lot of money, and this is why we went for a crowdfunding campaign. So it's possible to support our project. There are some great rewards. If you're not happy with the rewards, you can send me an email. We can develop a special reward for you that suits you better. It's also important to get the message out to everyone why this technology helps and how much it can help. This is what this project is about. We are going to showcase this technology to the local authorities in Venice, so that they can understand the benefits of the technology, so that they can tune their emission regulations in the future towards something that is firstly achievable, but secondly is also challenging enough to not keep doing diesel engines. We also proved the reliability of the system because the marine market is very slow in uptake because they are very concerned about the reliability.
And is that mainly a safety thing? Or?
It's a safety thing. You don't want to be out at sea and your engine doesn't start.
Yeah.
And with a hybrid system, the engine will be off most of the time and it only starts when you need it. And there's a lot of new stuff which they haven't heard of. Yeah. So they don't want to put that into a boat. There are many applications for hybrid technologies in the marine markets, wind farm support vessels, survey vessels, pilot boats, police boats, that are loitering for most of the time. Diesels are on all the time, not doing anything. It's not good for the diesel. It costs them a lot in terms of maintenance and fuel. The maintenance cost is actually the highest cost, which we can reduce with a hybrid system. But nobody's going to put this hybrid stuff into their boat, even if you give it to them for free, because they are afraid of the reliability. So we need to showcase the technology, not only in terms of showing the benefits, and similar to the electric car, we have to take people on board of the boat and show what it's like when you cruise around without noise. It makes such a difference. But we also got to showcase the reliability of the system. So we are developing a system that is very close to market. It's not a research system. I would still class it as a prototype because it's the first one we are designing and making. But in all the design, it is designed for manufacture. We are really and honestly heading for making it producible and as low cost as possible. So the risk for any normal investor or business angel is too high. They would ask for a too high return on investment. It's also difficult to actually see how we fit into the system of the distribution chain. We work with an engine manufacturer at the moment who's very keen to work with us on this. This is Hyundai. I had a very good chat with the CEO and we seem to feel like, let's do this. But they use a distribution chain, and how would we fit into that chain is a bit unclear, because if we are in the chain, we would have to add a profit margin, and so the product becomes too expensive. If we are outside the chain, we would be circumnavigating the existing distribution chain and upset them, obviously. We don't want that either. So I think I see us as someone who wants to kickstart technologies and say, this is better, this is around, develop it to a certain extent, and then potentially sell it on or help the other manufacturers to develop these technologies once they see that, yes, this makes sense, or once they have to. But if they don't, then we still got the option to manufacture and sell ourselves. But we got to be open-minded. But it would be really nice if we could de-risk this whole thing at the moment, because it's not feeling great. I am driving the business, our business, like a race car. I'm driving it really close to the edge with this project. We just felt like it's worthwhile, and I wanted to do something meaningful. And I think it's a great project. There's a lot of information on the IndieGogo crowdfunding site. We also, on our website, we also have information, and we have a newsletter. We are posting on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. We want to involve the public also in the technology, so that people understand, how does this technology work? Why is this good? Why don't you do pure electric? I don't mind these questions. So people can connect with us on the social media. And I will. It's
just Reap Systems, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just Reap Systems. Facebook, we've got Reap Systems. Twitter, also Reap Systems. Website on IndieGogo, the project is called Project Venice. So it's easy
we'll post a link up to that on in the description.
It's on your description. That's great. And so we are not a charity. So some people are always saying, should I support something, it's a profit organization, it's something bad. I mean, if all businesses were bad, then we should seriously rethink how our planet works at the moment, because the business, as I said in the beginning, all the business should be doing is adding value and organizing a bunch of people and making sure that everyone has got a good quality of life, without doing, with putting a lot of effort in. I mean, whenever REAP Systems has been making a profit in the past, I have to say usually on military projects, actually, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But that is what it is. We have been reinvesting that. I get my satisfaction out of doing stuff. I don't get it out of having lots of money on my bank account.
Yeah.
That doesn't. I don't find that very exciting.
Well, you wouldn't have started.
I wouldn't have started this
down
madness.
this whole path. Of,
No. So that's my commitment. If the crowdfunding campaign makes us £5,000, great. I mean, we're at 3,000 something now. If it makes us 100,000, great. If it makes us 2 million, I'm not going to run away with it. There's a lot we can do. I've mentioned the straddle carriers, and I can mention many other projects that need some money to start doing. And show that, either develop the technology or show the market what it can do. So I'm hoping that REAP Systems could be the Kickstarter.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to get into the way of others. But I want to show them that there is a way of doing things in a better way.
Yeah. So really pioneering things.
I'm sorry for the noise in the background. Someone is working on the bolt here, so I don't want to stop them working. It's a noisy day. Yeah.
Okay. No, that's great. Thank you very much, Dennis.